the BEAM Practice Improvement Network supplemental training, tools and strategies for managing productivity. This is a re-recording on October 21st of a webinar that we first did in August 8th. And today, both myself, Chris Copeland, Chief Operating Officer at the Institute for Community Living, and Scott Pidgeon, the Vice President for Business Manager of Clinics, also ICL, will be talking about tools for managing productivity. So the content today is we're going to be looking at setting productivity expectations, monitoring productivity, and particularly looking at managing for seasons, and really talking about a rationale for weekly tracking. Although we will be looking at some tools that help in other circumstances. We'll be looking at a baseline productivity tool that was in the original benchmarking tool, a monthly productivity tool, and also a weekly productivity tool. So we'll be going through those, or Scott will be going through those in some detail in a few minutes. I think the first thing I wanted to emphasize was really this is a huge cultural shift, or perhaps more accurately, a professional skill shift. And I really don't want to underestimate or gloss over the need for a skill set amongst clinical directors that maybe that we don't normally possess. And really the biggest pressure is on clinical directors in this cultural shift. I don't want to underestimate the need for clinicians to provide more volume, do more services, but really the clinicians are doing more of what they're used to, which is seeing clients. But for many of the clinical directors, it's a complete shift in how they manage. We're trying to connect their clinical expertise with business management skills to run clinics effectively, and this means learning new skills and new ways of managing. We need to manage, we need to connect the dollars and cents to the clinical side, and we social workers, which I'm one of, need to balance the clinical and business side. We need to really begin to understand that one without the other is potentially a failure for a clinic. And really important in this is the data. It's impossible, I believe, to make this shift without the data being readily available and being accurate. We want to be in a position where the numbers are not something that editorializes anything to what anybody's doing, but simply tells a story. The cultural shift we're trying to make is not one in which the financial people are telling the clinicians how to do their work, but really producing numbers that explain the financial, the business situation we're in. So for clinical directors seeking out, and obviously part of the work we're doing in these webinars is to help help the clinical directors with the business know-how in terms to manage the clinics. Sort of a side note, or something that we don't often talk about, is managing for seasons. The business that we're in terms of running clinics is very seasonal. If you look at productivity over the course of a year, and/or volume or attendance over the course of a year, I think we all really know that there are certain times certain seasons, certain times of the year when clinicians and the clinics are busier than others, and there are times when clinicians are able to meet the regular productivity requirements, and there are other times of the year when this becomes incredibly difficult. Obviously, we have a summer lull, the Christmas period, the holiday period is really very difficult to both keep clinics busy and also clinicians at full productivity. So we need to talk about this as a clinic. We need to talk with staff. We need to we need to make sure that clinicians are able to hit productivity standards during peak seasons and compensate for off-season times. It's not unusual for a clinic, specializing in children's services to have most of their vacations during the summer vacation, so people are available for the rush of services in the fall, and that we're looking to make sure that we have perhaps more staff available during fall and the spring season to make sure we can hit the higher demands. I mean, one way of looking at this is the analogy would be that I've used often is a flower shop, a florist. Obviously, they have more staff, they have more produce available during certain times of the year than others, and I think we need to understand this as a clinic, think strategically about scheduling vacations, and make sure staff know that there are times of the year when productivity is absolutely going to be expected and achieved, and other times of the year we need to plan for that being low. And talking about productivity, we need to make sure that we have set productivity expectations. So this has already been talked about in the financial benchmarking tool. It's defined as the ratio of billable to paid hours. We'll be looking again at a tool that Scott will be looking again at a tool we previewed in earlier Beam trainings, which connects productivity expectations with staff time and effort across service mix. So we're looking at that. I also want to make sure that we all understand there is no real magic number for productivity. It really depends on what your clinic needs to break even. The national average standards are around 60%. I think here at ICL we look at a standard where around 65%. That really is the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about in this webinar, making sure that productivity standard is clear in terms of the clinic breaking even, that all the staff know that as their standard for breaking even. And as we talk about this, we also, I think, need to understand what the implications are for not hitting that productivity standard as a clinic. Because after all, the number you achieve or the number you decide on in the clinic should really have some firm foundation in a requirement for the clinic, either to break even or to make a small surplus, or in some cases maybe you're looking at the clinics being a loss leader and a small deficit is built in. But that term productivity standard has to be connected to that outcome, that the goal is the outcome of the clinic for the year. And you need to make sure you're calculating it right. And as we go through the rest of the tools, that making sure that the productivity standard is clear to everybody, and you've worked closely with your finance department to make sure it's right. So we're going to be looking at a couple of tools in terms of monitoring, monthly and weekly. And I want to talk in a little bit about why weekly is so important. But monthly monitoring can be helpful if the data is not always available on a week-by-week basis. Monthly monitoring may be the best that you can achieve at the moment. So it's still useful to give high-level information and to try and steer change, and Scott will go through the monthly productivity tool in a moment. And if you haven't converted into using CPT codes, the monthly productivity tool will help with that conversion and see relationships that are affecting productivity. But I think the real gold standard and the real key to success is weekly monitoring. When we're trying to affect change, the longer the lag in terms of understanding where you are in the clinic, the harder it is to redress that change, the need to change. The information becomes outdated. People's trust in it gets eroded. So weekly data that allows the clinic director to identify where you're going and manage staff accordingly really is critical. If you think about it, if you're waiting for monthly data, your fiscal year starts in July, it can be the end of August, beginning of September, middle of September before you really get some accurate data. You're already almost a quarter into the year. Whatever changes you're trying to make, you have limited time to redress what could be some of the worst deficits any clinic is generating because of the summer months. If you're able to see clinicians' productivity on a weekly basis, if you're able to calculate the amount of revenue generated in that week, then it means that any changes, any corrections you need to make happen quickly before too much of a deficit's made, and how much people need to make up to get back on track is a smaller number and therefore feels more doable. I think the worst any position clinic can be in, and I think we're all used to this, is that once you begin to get financial information a couple of months into the year, the deficits are already so large they become a huge burden around people's necks. And all you end up doing is being in a very punitive or very reactive mode with the clinicians. So weekly numbers that are correct, that you have the full confidence from the finance department, help to make sure that the corrections that need to be made are small and incremental within people's grasp and are done as quickly as possible. So weekly monitoring may be the goal you're aiming for. You may not be there yet, but it should be something that if you should be aiming for as a goal as soon as possible. And now I'd like to hand it over to Scott to work through some of the new productivity tools.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, this is Scott Pigeon. I'm going to be going over the tools that we spoke about in a little bit more detail now. CTAC's excited to present 3 new tools, really. The baseline productivity tool, which we're going to review today first, which can help you set your productivity baseline per clinician and also help you figure out what your productivity expectations should be for each clinician in the service mix. There's the monthly productivity tool, which would allow you to look at productivity for each staff person on a monthly basis, so long as you have access to the actual services provided within that month aggregately. And also the weekly productivity tool, which allows you to look at staff's productivity on an individual basis, but you do need to have access to the weighted CPTs in order to use that particular tool. And again, we prefer that people look at their data on a weekly basis because it's much more valuable and easier to make changes, but understandably some people cannot get access to data in real time, or their systems are not quite prepared for it. So we're going to start with the baseline productivity tool. The baseline productivity tool really helps you establish your productivity expectation, like I had said, per clinician, and it really can help you look at the mix of services that are being provided and helps you effectively establish your expectations. As we look at the baseline productivity tool, and actually all of the tools, it's just important to remark that anything that is highlighted in yellow are inputs, which are areas that can be changed. On the upper left side, you'll see paid time off. This is all time that does not get counted toward productivity standards. So things like your holiday, your sick time, your personal, and vacation are all put into the inputs in yellow to give you a total number of days that are actually not included in productivity standard. To the right, under standard time, you'll see a standard work week. As you know, some people have a 40 hours, some people have a 37.5, some people have a 35-hour week, and you can adjust that accordingly. Under that, the other important thing is the billed hours to paid hours standard. That's basically what % of your time do you expect clinicians to be engaged in billable activity. I believe that ours is around 58%. And that's including taking into consideration the paid time off. If you're looking at it without that, it would be, of course, higher. And And that all helps to calculate a baseline annual billable baseline. As you can see, it comes out to 1716 in this case. Under that, again, the yellow and the percent service, you can change all of these inputs, and you just have to make sure that they add up at the bottom to 100. So you could say that, you know, 50% of your time was going to be spent in doing assessments or psychotherapy or whatever the case mix might be, and it will calculate it based on the service weight, which is the CPT weight, and will give you the weighted units to the right of that. And if you go down to the very bottom, it can tell you the expectation for, based on the services provided, what your units of CPT units will come out to on an annual basis. So this can be a really good tool for establishing it, figuring out what your service mix is, really figuring out what the expectation is for different types of clinicians as well. Of course, people who are doing all intakes are going to look different than your psychiatrists or prescribers, and that will look very different from your therapists and clinicians. So the next tool that I'd like us to take a look at is the monthly productivity tool. As Chris had mentioned, this tool is particularly useful for people who have a hard time getting weekly data. For people out there who may not be able to easily get the weighted CPT units or might not know them, in this case, this tool will actually convert the services into the weighted CPTs to give you an accurate idea of what you're generating. And it also helps to give you a high-level overview of your monthly status for your clinic. So if we just take a look at that tool. Hold on one second. And here we are, sorry. As you can see again, as with all the tools in the yellow, you will see the actual inputs. This one's calculated at a 35-hour work week. And along the top, you'll see the number of FTEs, the number of business days in that month, hours a day, automatically calculates the annual productivity goal per an FTE, productivity weeks in the year, depending on how you calculate it. And then below that, you'll see very similar to the other sheet, all of the different services are listed along the left. And then under each one of the columns next to that, you'll see a person's name. So you can list out all of your different clinicians in this, and you can also put in yellow above them the number of hours that they're actually working that week. Under that, for that month, you would have to have the aggregate numbers. So if you were tracking it on some other system outside, you could put in all of the yellow inputs, the number of actual services that the person provided. All you have to do is put that number in, and this system will automatically calculate the weighted CPT, which, as you can see, for this, under initial assessment, diagnostic, and treatment, 10 comes to 12.5 CPT. Actually, I'm sorry, 10.344. And again, all of the different categories calculate based on the weight to the left of that. And then the weight gets placed, so 10 CPTs at 0.662. Oops. I'm sorry about that. $10 comes out to 7.001 in this example. And If you scroll to the bottom of this, you'll see that it will add up all of the different units and give you a total at the bottom per month. And then it will also add to the right, and you can get a total for all of your clinicians, and it'll give you an idea of what you're billing both in units and also in the weighted CPT. So this is, as I said, could be a very good, along the bottom you'll notice also there's tabs for each month of the year. And there's also an instructional tab in case you need further explanation on any of the categories. Finally, I wanted to briefly go over the weekly productivity tool. This is the tool that we consider the most desirable if you actually happen to have a data system or another means for getting the weighted CPTs. This one does not convert the CPTs. You have to actually already have the weights available, but it allows you to track week by week and up year to date as well, and it can give you a real-time indication of how you're progressing, how each clinician is doing, and how your program as a whole is doing. So if we just want to take a look at that tool. Give me 1 second. Very similar to the other productivity sheets. Again, everything in yellow is an input, meaning you can put the input, you can input information into that. And the top left, again, similar to the others, the fiscal year, the week of the year you're in, whether it's the 1st through the 52nd week of the year, the available work weeks that you calculate in a year, the percent of billable hours to paid hours that you expect as far as per clinician, and the standard work week. These, however, can be adjusted. If you see underneath the work week, there's 2 ways you can calculate. You can always calculate just based on an average, or if you happen to always know the amount of time, you can calculate on exact time by just putting in the actual number of hours worked in this category. Under the inputs, actual weighted CPT achieved, you actually have to know how many CPTs that person generated. And from that, it will tell you the percent of their target, and then whether they had a shortfall or a surplus in that week. Then you move to the next series of columns, and you'll see that these are year-to-date actual. So you can track clinicians based on how they're doing up into current time. And again, it also will tell you a shortfall or a surplus, and also what their percent of target is for the year-to-date. After that is weekly visits. This is a very simple weekly way to keep track of no-show rate. Basically, it's the number scheduled, the number kept, and then the percent. And again, the columns next to that are same, but for year-to-date. Number of scheduled, number of visits kept, and then the percent. And this tool also, unlike the other ones, divides it out between 3 categories, really. Salaried clinicians, who could be working anywhere from like 20 hours to 40 hours, or whatever the case may be. Fee-for-service clinicians, who are paid on a fee-for-service basis. And then at the bottom, psychiatry. And we divide these out purposely because productivity expectations are sometimes different among these different categories, depending on your agency needs. And again, like the others, it also gives you an overall total at the bottom, and then which also helps you to track globally for the year how you're doing, whether you're in surplus, shortfall, and where you need to be. And again, like the other spreadsheet, the tabs are all along the bottom, and they're week by week. So that's January 1st week, 2nd week, 3rd week, 4th week, and then February. and then March, and so forth. So this is also a very helpful tool in tracking not just weekly data, but also year-to-date as well, and being able to tell in real time how you're doing as a clinic. So I hope this training exercise was helpful for everybody, and if anybody has any questions, of course they can contact us, and they can contact the CTAC Business Practice Project Manager, Justine Lee, to get questions referred to us. So thank you very much, and have a great day.